Crawford's got to hurry. Oh, no. Jesperson, half-court lead for the win. Jesperson knows it. Jameson through for the win. Gone. He did it. Bryce Drew did it. Jenkins for the championship. There's the pass to Leitner. Puts it up. Yes! The time, 18. Shot. Jordan. Michael Jordan. 14 seconds. Brown. Look outside. This is the point where he always hits it. Oh! Aaron Harrison beyond belief.
All right, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of At Large Bid. I'm Parker Fields here, as always, with my co-host Neil Meyer. And today we got a very special guest, Ian Stonebrook from the boardroom today. Ian, how are you doing today?
Man, doing awesome. Thank you guys for having me.
No problem, man. And today we're going to talk about a little bit about Under Armour and what's going on with that company as a whole, as they're losing schools left and right now, and they just don't seem to know what's going on with their company in general right now. So we're going to get into that, talk a little bit about some schools that have recently left Under Armour and in recent years, and just how Under Armour as a whole has gone downward recently in recent years. And we'll just get into that. So first off, let's talk a little bit about how you see where me and Neil are from, right over here in Cincinnati, how they have just recently left Under Armour and went to Jordan Brand, and what you think about that move for them.
Yeah, I mean, well, like, candidly, I'm a huge fan of Cincinnati, very much from a Jordan Brand sense. You know, I grew up watching the Kenny Satterfield team, Steve Logan, Kenyon Martin, DeMar Johnson, could go on for days about those squads. So from an aesthetic alignment standpoint and, kind of being full circle, I think it's really cool. I'm curious to see how it plays a part in recruiting and things of that nature. And I think it's unique because much as schools, just about every school has changed sponsors over the course of, their playing days, their days of playing games on TV. You know what I mean? But I think anytime you have somebody return to maybe where that core is the strongest, from a fanfare, or at least the agent fan, I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you. I think that Jumpman logo, let's be real, just looks 1,000 times better than the Under Armour logo on a jersey. And recent years, me and Neil have covered UC, been at the games and everything like that. And it's just going to be a lot more aesthetic, as you said, just seeing that Jordan Brand out there on the court and everything like that. Neil, what do you think?
Yeah, I think the same way there. I mean, obviously we've talked about it in the past. The Jordan Brand just sticks. I mean, even when they were Under Armour schools, covering this team and these programs for the last 3.5 years, like I have, you've never gone to an event where you haven't seen a Jordan throwback in the crowd somewhere. Someone was always going to be repping the Jordan throwback, the vintage UC gear. Now that the partnership is back, they just recently announced they will be leaving Under Armour and joining the Jordan and Nike brand. I mean, I think it's fantastic. It brings back the old memories of Bob Huggins, as Ian mentioned, DeMar Johnson, Kenny Satterfield, Kenyon Martin. The list can go on, but it's huge, especially making that transition into the Big 12, one of the biggest power conferences, not only in the sport of basketball, but in football as well. And it's a Power 5 conference. So not only are they making that transition with the new conference alignment, but they're also going in with the new look, and a look that they're very familiar with. So I think it's huge for the University of Cincinnati.
Yeah, and Neil, what did you say? What were the 5 schools you said if Notre Dame ends up leaving? What were the 5 college football teams that are going to be wearing Under Armour, and that's it?
So after Notre Dame's contract runs out in 2024, there will only be 5 college football teams left still repping Under Armour. And those schools left are Auburn, Maryland, Wisconsin, Northwestern, and South Carolina within the Power 5 conference.
Yeah, that's shocking to hear, honestly. And I really didn't notice that, to be honest with you. I thought, obviously Adidas, Nike have more schools on board, Jordan Brand, everything like that. But I didn't realize there were only 4 or 5 schools out there left, like wearing Under Armour in college football. It's kind of crazy to even think about and realize.
Yeah, and they just brought out, for Ian probably knows more about this situation a little more than what we do, but they just partnered or severed ties with UCLA. UCLA was the biggest Under Armour school in all of college sports, roughly. I think it was like a $280 million deal over like 15 years, if I remember right. And they just announced that they paid UCLA out, and UCLA is now looking for a new brand deal as well. So that's massive, especially for Under Armour. Knowing what UCLA has been able to do, Chip Kelly's a big name that draws a lot of recruits out there to UCLA. Obviously, Mick Cronin and what the basketball team is doing out there, it's huge for Under Armour, or it's huge for UCLA now to explore those avenues and really kind of see what's out there. But for Under Armour standpoint, it's massive. It's a huge loss detrimentally.
Yeah, and I think more than anything, I mean, it's interesting you bring up UCLA because, UCLA to me is a school that has historically a lot of cachet as an Adidas university, as a Reebok university before that. I mean, I'm sure the folks, much older than me would, say whether it was Adidas or Converse that they were wearing under John Wooden, that it looks different there. But yeah, that's a similar situation where I think that. And I think candidly, just Under Armour, like a lot of brands that grow, or all brands have ebbs and flow, just were very aggressive when they were having an incredibly renaissance time. I mean, they had the MVP in the NBA, MLB, and NFL. You know what I mean? So they were batting 1,000 for about 5 years straight, and that's when I think they did some of these kind of more gargantuan bites in terms of getting the UCLA's, the Cincinnati's, the Notre Dame's, obviously, respectfully, UCLA and Notre Dame being, pretty pinnacle in terms of, big schools that move a lot of merch. And yeah, obviously, they divested in those schools. They also, broke contract with MLB. They were supposed to have MLB rather than Nike. And yeah, I think it's just kind of that same timeline. I think they grew really fast, and I think they've been, honestly, I think pretty smart and strategic in terms of dialing into exactly what people want for them. And I think a lot of that is still, it's tough because the base layer space is much more competitive than it was when they basically introduced it, in the late 90s, early 2000s. But I mean, I don't know about in Cincinnati, but I can say in Austin, the Curry product still definitely has a grip on the kids. I think they have some really good stuff going there. And I do feel like from it's been a while since I've been back to the Midwest, but I feel like from a Midwest football sense, outdoor sense, baseball sense, I think Under Armour still has pretty high brand cachet. I just, I think to your guys' point, it's unless there's that history built up with, winning, it's, with a certain program, it just aesthetically doesn't register the same as some of the other logos.
Yeah, 100%. Like you said, I was going to bring that up too. Like, athletes wise, they still have some top tier athletes. I mean, they have Bryce Harper, one of the biggest names in baseball, obviously. They have Steph Curry, like you said. They have Joel Embiid. They got a lot of big names signed to their I don't even know what I'm trying to say, is to their logo and everything like that. And they definitely have some big names on there. And I think with the colleges, like you said, it's just something about that logo is just not aesthetically pleasing. And like, you want to see some of those big time schools with that Nike, with that Adidas logo, because it's just more nostalgic to see and everything like that.
Yeah, well, I think some of it is just, like what they didn't or how long I got to see. Like, I mean, to me, like an Under Armour logo on an Auburn jersey makes perfect sense because I have memories of Cam Newton winning there and also wearing that logo in the pros. I mean, I think what they've done with South Carolina, football, sure, but especially from a women's basketball standpoint, they've won. We've become used to seeing it. So, I mean, I think some of that stuff takes time, but I think too that it's really interesting. Like right when they were like super red hot and making a lot of these moves, Kevin Plank at the time, I feel like was very critical of Adidas, who was having a very different but similar surge or moment, off Boost, Kanye, things of that nature. And they were getting they're getting much more aggressive in signing individual athletes in major sports. And Plank basically said that was really dumb, and like kind of took a shot at Adidas. And, the flip side was Under Armour invested in a lot of these schools and league deals, which ended up biting off a little bit more than they could chew. But I would say that they were also right, not to like shade Adidas or whatever, because they've got some cool stuff coming. But like, if we look at the industry as a whole, a lot of brands are not putting the money towards second tier stars or incoming draft picks. The model to me has been, I won't say completely rewrote, but it's a lot more. You have depending on the size of your brand, if you're Nike and you're $164 billion company, you can have 5, 6, 7, 8 signature basketball guys or gals. If you're Under Armour, pay a lot of money for a lifetime deal for Steph Curry. Maybe the Embiid stuff isn't really working like that. I mean, he's a phenomenal player, but I think it's trouble translating in the market. And you pick, your Kelsey Plums, your Bones Highlands, your couple here and there. But most of these brands are basically, it's 4 or 5 guys or gals who really move the needle. And we're going to put all our money in that. And then, like you say, teams are leagues. So it's an evolving time. And I think NIL will only make it more both fragmented and democratized.
I think what Under Armour, the mistake they made in the last few years, because once they got Steph Curry, they were pretty hot there in like 2015 when Steph Curry really first popped off and was like considered the best player in the league. Like his shoes were selling like crazy back then, and they've definitely slowed down. They still sell a lot with little kids and stuff like that, but it's definitely slowed down a bit from where it was. And I think the mistake they made, honestly, was not getting more into like the lifestyle brand part of things. Like Adidas did for a while there, like getting Kanye obviously just made Adidas as a brand just grow a ton. And obviously it all flamed out with them. But I think that partially had stuff to do with Under Armour with sports too, flaming out a little bit, just because they didn't make that change, to expand to a lifestyle brand too. Because like nobody's wearing Under Armour clothing really often on the streets like it is like Nike or even Adidas. Like people wear Adidas and stuff, but Under Armour just kind of fell behind with that, in my opinion.
Definitely, yeah. I'd say I both agree and disagree with that. I think you make a great point that it's no question that right now lifestyle sportswear is. I mean, Nike's probably making more money off Tech Fleece than signature sneaker X, Y, or Z. You know what I mean? Like it's definitely things in that space that move in masses and do really well. I think that. So around that time you're talking about, Under Armour, like circa 2015, all this heat and energy around Steph, like, Curry 1s and Curry 2s actually, I I hate to use aftermarket value as any barometer on whether a shoe's good or not. I think it can be a little overstated, but like having thematic colorways that actually had chase to them. And at the same time, they started to try to do lifestyle Curries, which didn't really translate. And to be fair, Nike was doing the same thing with Kobe, Kevin, and LeBron, and it didn't really hit. But and also to Under Armour's credit too, they signed A$AP Rocky. I have that shoe. I think it's a great shoe, but they didn't really do anything else around it. They signed Tim Coppins to design the I forgot what they called it, but it was basically like their equivalent to like Nike Sportswear or Adidas Originals. And the product was really well made. Just that partnership, for a variety of reasons, dissolved really fast. So yeah, it's kind of a catch-22, because you're right. I think that what Under Armour in hindsight could have maybe done better is continue to make key in on performance, because I think that's what people buy them for. But maybe been a little bit more risk-taking in terms of aesthetics that were, appeasing to lifestyle, and which is that's a tough needle to thread. But I think they did it on a few of the Currys, and I think even what they're doing now with the Flotro stuff and like the kind of different categories, they've kind of rewrote some of their wrongs, or maybe like atoned for previous sins, even like the joke of the whole roasted, white Curry 2 low.
Yeah.
Flotro, I think it's a phenomenal shoe. I've been playing in them. But yeah, I think it's some of just like think that's what a lot of brands, run into is like, how big can you get in, who really wants your stuff? And I think for Under Armour right now, it's probably the kids that love the Steph product, probably similar to the way we grew up on Air Jordans or Kobe's or LeBron's or KD's. And then I think it's still probably a lot of that, Dixter Academy sport consumer that wants the hoodie with the huge shield logo and, real tree camo, and that's it. But, it'll be interesting.
Yeah.
So now we
Good.
talk about Under Armour a little bit. What would you suggest be next for them, especially now during a time like this where they might lose one of the bigger schools in Notre Dame? Obviously, they could re-sign, but what would we think is a good route for Under Armour next to take that next move to really get their brand out there and stay within this industry and build that image a little bit more as they prepare the next step?
Yeah, that's a great call, and I'm not sure. I mean, I think that I would double down on Maryland and Auburn and South Carolina, like schools that have a lot of built-in Under Armour equity. Like obviously Maryland, kind of first and foremost. The only tough thing about that is like that's all East Coast. You know what I mean? You probably want some California presence or Midwest, and I think Northwestern is interesting, just because like Northwestern isn't really a top tier athletic institution, at least in the most of the sports we follow, but it's a hell of a brand in terms of a really good school, in the heart of the Midwest. But yeah, I mean, I think, to be honest, I really think what the new model is going to be is honestly signing athletes of all sports, but probably still basketball and football and maybe baseball to a track. But to NIL deals in high school and college, as crazy as that sounds, I think that, you can probably sign a player of, a 4 or 5 star, ranking to a much more easier to swallow deal that could turn out into future potential and have the eyeballs while they're on All the Balls Life mixtapes for X amount of thousands of dollars versus saying, we're going to give, trying to think who's having a hot postseason. Like we're going to give Caleb Martin, even $2 million or whatever, just because I love Caleb Martin, but I don't know if him or really anybody not named Steph, Luka, Ja, Zion, whoever, is going to result in $2 million worth of sales. You know what I mean? It's just it's a very top heavy and bottom heavy space, I feel like, for athlete endorsements. And it's very strange to be whether you're a really good school or a really good player, but maybe not like great or have a ton of sizzle. It's an odd space.
Yeah, 100%. And I even think of brands like smaller than that, like Li Ning, like they've been making way better basketball shoes than Under Armour, like aesthetics wise. Like they make some nice shoes. Brands like that, like there's a lot of smaller brands that are even, a little more popular right now when it comes to like just like players wearing them, because I feel like there's not that many players signed with Under Armour, honestly. I mean, Embiid and Curry are the only big names I can think of basketball wise. Can you think of anybody else? You said Bones Highland, but that's not a.
Yeah, they've got Bones Highland. They have Will Barden. And they run his AAU program. He's like Baltimore DMV based. They have a few gals in the WNBA. I'm blanking on names right now, but Kelsey Plum's obviously high up on that list. But yeah, and I mean, again, it's one of those things where, I don't know. I don't know the numbers on how much they're paying Steph a year. But if you wrangled up 40 or 50 role players or semi-stars, which was kind of the visibility model that Adidas was going with a few years back, I don't really think it impacts that. Like one Steph Curry is going to outsell, 50 mid-level guys, maybe 100, or gals for that matter, the flip side on the WNBA. So, yeah, I mean, I think there's actually power in being more specific. And I think you make a great point about Li Ning. I mean, from a design or innovation standpoint, yeah, they're killing it. And they have some great endorsers. And whether you put a a swoosh, a shield, or stripes, or whatever one's desired logo is instead of the Li Ning mark, I think some people's opinions might change in terms of how cool or not cool they think the shoes are. But that's another thing too, where I want to say I'd have to pull the number, but there are so many more stores and consumers to sell Li Ning to in China than there are in the US. Like, it's a total wash. So, even though Jimmy Butler may not have his shoe on US shelves, the amount of money he's making over there, I mean, he'd have to play for the Knicks or the Lakers to take home with any other brand.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and
Exactly.
It's great we mentioned this earlier too, but now it just got me thinking too. Under Armour is predominantly top-heavy brand within sports like women's volleyball, men's volleyball, all across of college athletics as well, professional athletics. We've seen it here in Cincinnati, based out of Jordan Thompson, who's now playing professionally overseas. She is now one of the Under Armour brand athletes for her and stuff going on with Under Armour. So it's big to think Under Armour is in that aspect too, because now it's just starting to hit me like they're involved in much more than just the typical basketball and football, because they have all the women's volleyball, the women's basketball, all that other aspects. And women's volleyball is huge for Under Armour.
Yeah, that's an interesting space, and I mean, I think that, the same way they came in is probably the same way they're going to continue. I mean, I'm 35, so I'm probably a few years older than you guys, but like, I know growing up in Michigan, like when Under Armour, basically kind of first started getting distributed across the country, shoot, I mean, if you got a football game to play and it's going to be 40 or 50 degrees out because it's October or November in Michigan, that cold year mock, there's no comp. You know what I mean? Nike didn't have anything like that on the market. You could go to Walmart and get some long johns, but maybe that wasn't gonna hit quite the same. And I think that tapping some of those really specific spaces that, like you said, for women's volleyball, like, that is hard for a Nike and Adidas, whoever, to give the proper bandwidth to make the perfect product. Like, they have the resources, but that's probably why like ASICS is still very, successful in that space. And I mean, yeah, I think if Under Armour really doubles down on who their consumer already is, rather than maybe trying to grow it, I think that's the way. But I mean, shoot, if we had 5 hot podcasts or 5 hot stories in a row, we just want to be writing, doing more podcasts and writing more stories. And I mean, that's what was going on with them in the 2010s. They had Tom Brady, Steph Curry, Cam Newton, Jordan Spieth, you name Bryce Harper. You kind of couldn't tell them nothing. So I get it.
Yeah, exactly. Tim asked this question before we get out of here. He asked, do we think that New Balance could become a sponsor of schools? I think they could. New Balance is hot right now. I think they could for sure. And they're starting to get into the athletic space more, not just the lifestyle space. I know they got DeJounte Murray. They got Kawhi. I mean, even rappers, they got Jack Harlow. They got a bunch of guys signed to New Balance. So I definitely think they could. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think they could as well. Obviously, you mentioned Jack Harlow, Kawhi Leonard, a couple others there. But overall, I think New Balance is on the rise. And we talk about the shoes, the lifestyle brand, but they're getting more into the apparel, the athletic gear. And me personally, I'm a big fan of New Balances. Obviously, I have a couple pairs, but I think they're comfortable. And I think it's a great opportunity, especially within the athletics, the track and field, the cross country, more the running aspect of things within the sports industry. I think they can make a predominant rise here as an apparel company, Tim.
Yeah, I think, Tim's right. I think that's a great call. I mean, I think what we will see with New Balance, and this is just my guess or opinion, but like what I was saying in terms of like NIL disrupting school sponsorships, endorsements, basically the current model that's existed for, I guess, just about 30 years, like give or take, is I think with what New Balance is doing with Rich Paul and Clutch Athletics, they're going to be able to make some noise in the high school space. I mean, one could argue that Rich Paul and Clutch basically created NIL by having Darius Basley take the 1-year internship at New Balance and foregoing Syracuse. And what's going to be interesting there is if they are, I mean, shoot, I'm too old to be able to tell you who, like, the top, sophomore, junior, guy or gal in, basketball, baseball, or football is right now. But if they're able to get some of these kids, similar to kind of like what Puma did with Mikey Williams, to clutch athletic deals, they have a chance to upend the grassroots basketball circuit as is, with, Nike having a circuit, Adidas having a circuit, Under Armour having a circuit. So that's interesting. But yeah, I think if they got into I think they could do college sports if they did it kind of tight and right, for lack of a better way to put it. I mean, if they had like a, New England based, or, like near their base university, maybe even Ivy League one, who knows, where it made sense in terms of having some brand DNA. Or, I mean, if Jack Harlow, continues the run he's on, maybe get Louisville and kind of have that through line there. But I do think that if they were to, I mean, I don't know, unless they swung for the fences and try to get Notre Dame, I think they'd probably run into the same issues that a lot of these brands do when, basically buying these big colleges.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. Well, I know you get out here. I know you're busy. Thank you for coming on. Really appreciate it. This was Ian Stonebrook. Go follow him on everything. Really appreciate it. You want to plug anything?
Yeah, thank you for coming on, Ian.
Dude, my pleasure. Yeah, I appreciate it, guys. Sorry I had to cut a little short, and I hope I didn't yap too much. But no, this was a lot of fun, and yeah, more good stuff to come on Boardroom. Nothing. Yeah, and actually some stuff in the future in terms of college and licensing and things of that nature. But yeah, I'd say go reread that Cincinnati Jordan Brand oral history. That's a real fun one. Alex Meacham, former Bearcat, and a lot of great voices on it. So that's and 1999, they got the old Jordan Cincinnati shorts back out too, the cat scratch. So get a pair of those. But that's about it.
Yes, sir. We know Meach too. Neil has a podcast with him. I used to play his AAU program, so I know Meach too.
Oh, heck yeah, that's awesome, man. Great guy.
Yes,
yeah,
sir.
Awesome guy.
All right, but this was another episode of At Large Bid. We'll see you guys all in the next one. See you guys.
See you guys.